YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here, finally back from my business trip this week. I was out in California. It was crazy busy. I was getting like some annual evaluations done on my engineers and then taking care of a bunch of supply chain studies that we were doing. So I was out in California because that's where they grow a lot of the produce that my company distributes. So it was very busy, had a lot to do, and I probably got in close to 60 hours of work in 4 days, and then I had the travel day coming home on Friday. So I got back last night, got my gaming desktop put back together. MSI did send me a Z270 gaming M7 motherboard, and I had a KB Lake 7700K to put in it. And I've got that baby overclocked to 5 gigahertz, which is what's pushing this rig right now. I'll give you all a full video on that. And then I think I just about have a review of my laptop ready. And definitely appreciate MSI providing me with this. Like I said, I'll make another video acknowledging what they were able to give me, and yes, they did send it to me, so it was something they sent to me, just so you all know. They sponsored it, and anyway, I'll show it off to you, but we're here to talk about Brettonia. Now, I cannot talk about Brettonia as a faction in one video. I'm going to miss too much, and so I just want to give you a quick summary of what I know about them so far. I have not gotten to play them a whole lot in multiplayer other than what you all saw against Ninjahunds. I have gotten to play them some in campaign. I think in campaign it's going to be very easy to dominate with Brettonia once you kind of get the ball rolling, and it's because their cavalry is so good, and in campaign you don't have to worry about being cost effective in terms of building an army, so you'll basically just be able to face roll your opponents with elite cavalry once you get to that point, and their cavalry will be very, very good at that. You have options. Let's just kind of talk through what all they have to offer. Now, from a lord standpoint, I'm using a custom mod right now, so it shows way more lords than they actually have available. You can choose between these prophetess units here, and you've got life, beast, and heavens that are all available to you. So an expansion of the magic available to Brettonia was a big deal. You can bring just a standard lord of Brettonia, which you all seen before, or you can bring Lewin, and then we have Alberic too, who's been added. So Brettonia's got a lot of options. Alberic and Lewin are similar, and then of course you got the Green Knight who's been added in as a legendary hero, an ethereal hero. So Brettonia overall, I'm happy to say, is a cav-heavy faction, and that's how they should be used. That's good. That makes sense. It gives them a unique play style and feel within the factions that we have, and it also makes their campaign unique because of their chivalry and other stuff like that. So in terms of Brettonia keeping to the unique feel that all Warhammer factions seem to have, they do fit that. So as I look through the factions, everybody kind of has their own role, and I think Brettonia now has their role. I think they're going to be great against the undead. I think they're also going to have some success against factions that just have a hard time stopping cavalry, and there's some of them that do. But I do think the undead still have tools. Now, Brettonia is going to be a masters of the air too, because they have Pegasus Knights, they have Royal Pegasus Knights, they have Hippogriff Knights, all these flying units, Paladin, Lewin Leoncoeur, they have Lore of Life. They are going to be brutal if they just go into an all-out air mode. So I think that Brettonia is going to have cav supremacy on both the ground and in the air. As a general rule, it depends on what army you build. And like I said, I haven't spent a lot of time building armies. What I will do is I'll probably spend some time talking to Ninjahunds. I don't know why so many of you give him a hard time. If you don't like him, that's fine. You don't have to watch him. But the guy plays a ton of battles, and I like collaborating with him on some of that because he gets a chance to build up a lot of knowledge that I don't get a chance to go get. So I'll probably spend some time talking with him about builds, and I'll bring that back in some of the other videos too. But just general rule, you're going to have shaky infantry with only a couple of options that can really hold out. Foot Squires are a solid infantry unit for the price. They are not these OP monsters in my mind that people are making them out to be. I've tested them. Orc Biggins beat them. Black Orcs smash them. Great Swords beat them. Graveguard with great weapons beat them. All these units beat them. Now, the Foot Squires are cheaper than those units, so we would expect that they are a good unit for the cost, and I'm not saying that they aren't a very cost-effective unit. I'm just saying that I don't personally see anything that makes them OP at the moment. My mind could change if you all give me good information or I'm able to get a chance to feel that out. But in terms of the other infantry, Battle Pilgrims are kind of a nice damage dealer unit. Nothing too crazy about these guys. They have Frenzy, though, which makes them useful. A couple of things to note. They did take away the charge defense against all on the men-at-arms, shield, spears, and halberd units. I actually kind of wish they would add that back to the halberd units. I think that would give Brettonia a unique option that no one else has access to, but I don't know, maybe it takes away from the overall balance. They have this Grail relic here that you can use to basically buff the leadership to keep your infantry in the fight longer, so it's obvious that Brettonia is going to struggle from an infantry standpoint, And there's a couple of options they have, like the Foot Squires and this Grail Relic, to help keep some of your cheaper units around. They have these 100 cost peasant mobs, which outside of the vampires gives Brettonia an interesting meat shield unit that not a lot of other people have access to, and that could be very useful. The peasant bowmen took a nerfing in the last patch, so they're not quite as effective as they used to be, but you have more options. You have the ones that shoot fire and pox arrows. Pox is just, as far as I can tell, they're just typical poison arrows, which gives Brettonia a nice option there. And then the fire ones are actually pretty good. I mean, they cause flaming damage, and up against the Wood Elves, who have a lot of units that are vulnerable to that type of thing, these guys could be quite useful. Durthu's vulnerable to it, Branch Wraiths, Dryads, Treekin, all those units are vulnerable to fire damage. And then, of course, any unit that has regen, like Crypt Horrors and others, are also vulnerable to the fire damage, and it makes these units a nice option to have out there for Brettonia. Now, here's where the real big difference is. In terms of cavalry, they added in Questing Knights, they added in Grail Knights, they also added in Knights Errant, which are not going to be anything to write home about per se, but again, these guys will be useful in the campaign. And the, look at that, the Knights Errant have the charging thing, the lance formation. That's crazy. I didn't know they had that, so that'll actually make them pretty darn useful, because the other melee cavalry units don't have it. It's a shock cavalry, my bad. I kept thinking this was a, yeah, well, never mind. That's great for cheap shock cavalry to get that charge thing like that. That means Knights Errant will play an interesting role. So it's just the Questing Knights and the Grail Guardians who are the dedicated melee cavalry. But yeah, so Brettonia has both options. The dedicated melee cav is the Questing Knights and the Grail Guardians. I think the Questing Knights, we've tested these guys. I think I showed you in a previous video. These guys just chew up great swords. They chew up everything that you put in their path. It's a heavily armored infantry who doesn't have bonus versus large. These guys will eat them alive. So this is going to be Brettonia's main threat to an infantry-heavy army. So if you're going to be bringing infantry-heavy, you might ought to, like, really, I think that the Greenskins are the ones who have the best counter, in the sense that they have Orc Biggins, and those are one of the few units who can hold their own, I think, against the Questing Knights. So you have to be very careful with your infantry with these Questing Knights around, because they are going to be very good. Grail Knights give you a unit that's immune to Vigor. They're immune to Psychology. They have the Lady's Blessing, which is 20% physical resistance. They have Lance Formation, which gives them additional charge damage, speed, and acceleration. So this is going to be Brettonia's damage dealer. The Grail Knight is going to be the ultimate option for a Hammer and Anvil style army. And I think you're going to see Brettonia wanting to kind of take Hammer and Anvil tactics, or terror tactics in the sense of hit and run, heavy damage, and charges. You're going to have other options here. The Pegasus Knights, Royal Pegasus Knights. What are the difference? The Royal Pegasus Knights cause magical damage. You can see the stat differences there. They have more charge bonus, more weapon strength. We could check their bonus versus large and see if that's different. It's 10 on the standard, and it's going to be 12, yeah, on the Royal Pegasus Knights. So it's a lot more cost, though, to add into it. So it's up to you on whether or not you would think something like that would be useful. But to have options here, again, these guys can do some serious dive bomb damage, especially the Royal Pegasus Knights with this charge bonus. How do they play out in multiplayer? Not 100% sure yet. We'll see. And then you even got these Royal Hippogriff Knights, which do some fantastic armor-piercing damage. I've heard people complaining about these units. I'll be interested to learn more about them and see whether or not they really are worth the cost. I could see them being worth the cost since they cause terror. If you're able to use them in the right moments, you should be able to terrify lots of enemy units, assuming you're not up against an army that has a lot of immunity to that. But there's a couple of things that I just wanted to test through with Brettonia and start off. I'm going to test on this episode some very unrealistic scenarios in the sense that you're not likely to see this type of thing, but it's just more of a, why am I showing it? Well, it's just for sake of data points. So one of the complaints that I've heard is that Grail Knights are better than Blood Knights and that they shouldn't be. So let's just see. I'm going to actually put a unit of Blood Knights out here on the battlefield. So no Lord for either unit, no spells for either unit. Who is actually the better unit? Let's go out to the battlefield and check. Alright, so here comes the Grail Knights. I'm going to use their wedge formation. The idiotic AI did countercharge me. It was kind of at the last second, but they did it. So who's the better unit? We're going to fast forward and find out. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the Blood Knights. Now, I did lose my general there, but the Blood Knights could very well lose their general too. That's just something that you can't really avoid in this mod. But there you go. Wedge with the Lance formation versus Blood Knights. Blood Knights don't have any support from Necromancer spells, anything else like that. Neither do the Grail Knights. You can see that it's a very tight battle, but in my opinion, this one's clearly going to go to the Blood Knights. So the Blood Knights are the superior unit there, so they won that. Well, what happens if we do another match where I don't use the Lance formation? Is it simple? And here's the battle without the Lance formation. Will it be any different? So Grail Knights versus Blood Knights, the no Lance formation version. Let's just see what happens, see if there's a big difference. The Blood Knights appear to be winning again to me, and if anything, maybe more decisively this time. They're decisively ahead. So are Grail Knights better than Blood Knights? I think the answer is no, from what I'm seeing here. I mean, just from the stats of it and the engagement there, no. But let's go have a little discussion. So what are the key things to remember when it comes to Grail Knights versus Blood Knights? What are the other factors that are extremely likely to be at play? You're not ever likely to just run into a scenario where you're going to get a 1v1 between Grail Knights and Blood Knights, because there are leaders on the battlefield for the vampires that cause replenishment, that can cast Invocation to hack. Now, of course, the Bretonnians have access to the Lore of Life. They have access to the Lore of Heavens with all of its buffs and debuffs. There are so many different factors that could play into a Grail Knight versus Blood Knight fight, and I think that the Grail Knights are perfectly capable of winning if you are able to best the enemy at using magic, builds, and support from magic or other units. That's going to be the deciding factor in who wins between the vampires and Bretonnians whenever it comes to cavalry. So I think that's the things that you got to keep in mind. The vampires have bats who can interrupt charges, they have Invocation into Heck, they have replenishment, they have skeleton spears, whereas I could turn around for the Bretonnians and say they have access to the Lore of Life with regrowth, which gives you extra physical resistance and healing. They have spears that can go and support the fight. They have the Lore of Heavens, which can buff the attack of the Grail Knights and debuff the Blood Knights in terms of their attack and defense. You've got all these different options and factors out there that can play in, so that's where I'm not really buying into the Blood Knights should be better than Grail Knights, and it's because they are better, in my opinion. Just from what I've seen here, if you know something that I don't, that you've seen that I'm not understanding, let me know. But that was just kind of the interesting test that I wanted to put the Grail Knights through. In terms of one other thing I want to test in this video just to have some fun with, and then I just really want you all to leave me comments about what it is that you want to see coming up in future tests. But how effective are fire arrows, for instance, if you were able to get some focus fire in? Let's take a unit like Durthu, for instance, and if we throw Durthu into the mix, where is that giant angry tree? Here he is. I'll let him keep Flock of Doom, because that's certainly a realistic expectation. We'll even give him Sword of Daith, for goodness sakes. So there you go, Durthu. He's got all of his little things there, and let's go have a test here and see, are the flaming arrows pretty effective at killing tree units? We're getting the battle started here, and Durthu's already hit me with the Flock of Doom. That's why I gave it to him. It's pretty understandable that he would have access to that in combat. Now, obviously, again, you're not going to see Durthu trying to go one-on-one with a ton of archers, but what if Durthu gets caught in combat and these archers get a few seconds to fire? He has a 40% weakness to flaming damage, and you can see that it does indeed wreck him in a serious hurry. Before he's even able to close the distance with the flaming archers, they are able to destroy him. So you can imagine this would be just as effective at getting rid of probably branch wraiths, treekin, dryads, all that other kind of stuff. Now, you still have to deal with protecting these guys from wild riders. You're going to have to deal with protecting them from elven archers, which are still quite good. So, I mean, you still have to deal with that, but as Brettonia, if you find a way to pressure everything else, and you could easily take out Durthu or treekin or whatever else it would be, this definitely could potentially give you an advantage. Now, remember though, these fire arrows don't have any impact extra. Well, actually, they may have an impact. Let's go look real quick. I'm trying to remember if when a unit gets up on a forest dragon, if they have that weakness to the fire, and it may be the case. I just don't remember right off the top of my head. Let's get the Glady because she's pretty popular. Missile resistance. Yeah, there is no weakness to fire here on the Glady. In fact, she even gets 20% physical resistance. So yeah, it wouldn't be the case. So, I mean, it'd be a risk, but I mean, obviously, again, in campaign, if the elves are using a whole bunch of forest kin units against you, like this dragon, for instance, has I believe the dragon has a weakness to fire. No? I thought it did. Good grief, I'm just all kinds of wrong. So if they were using a bunch of treekin against you, or dryads, or other tree units like Durthu, branch wraiths, all those units here with this fire weakness, That's what you have to keep an eye out for. So the fire arrows could be good against that. Well, are they good against units that have regeneration, like Cryptors? Well, you better believe they're going to be pretty good. Let's just go take an example. I'll see you back on the battle map, and we'll show you against the Cryptors. All right, focused flaming fire against a unit with the regeneration trait. And remember that the regeneration trait gives a weakness to fire as well. You can see there 20%, so it's not as bad as the tree units. But one volley from the 4 archers leaves the Cryptors mostly wiped out, and then a follow-up volley is enough to finish it. So you can see these flaming archers are going to be dealing with Cryptors in a major hurry. So even if I allow the Cryptors to catch my unit, which I could flee away and make this more challenging for them, but let's just say that I don't. I just charge and keep firing. I'm going to be able to easily mop the floor with Cryptors. So I think that this is another potential use against the undead that you'll see from the fire arrows. They are easily able to deal with the Cryptors. Anything that's going to be low armor and regeneration is just going to die extremely quick. Let's jump back out and just kind of have a last couple of discussions. That's all I'm going to test on this one. I know it's a fairly short episode, and it's because I want your feedback. What do you want to see me test? Now, I'm going to be playing battles with Brettonia all week. This is not going to be a one-part faction focus. This is going to be a week-long faction focus. What kind of matchups are you interested to see? What kind of units do you want me to focus on as we go through this faction focus? What other unit tests do you want to see me do here? Make sure and distinguish, things that you want to see me test for purposes of campaign or multiplayer, and what kind of armies or lords or other stuff that you want to see me focus on in multiplayer. Are there things that you think are overpowered, underpowered, things that we should focus on? Again, I really need your feedback to make this a successful Brettonia faction focus. This was just a kickoff point, so again, cav heavy faction, mobility is king when it comes to Brettonia. They have some skirmishing options, though it's not going to be their main strength. They have some infantry options, although obviously it's not going to be their strength. And they're going to be a pretty decent faction in terms of magic availability. Not top tier like the Empire, but still, pretty solid. They have Lore of Beast, Lore of Heavens, Lore of Life. Again, that's the stuff you get to work with. I think that the Brettonians, just right off the top of my head, appear to be a hard counter to the vampires. I don't know really how they stack up against all the other factions just yet, because I haven't gotten a chance to try it. That's just my thoughts, is I think that really Brettonia hard counters the vampires for the most part. What are your thoughts? I'm curious to see. Sorry I was a little bit late getting a video up today. I'll have more up soon. I do have to go see some family today, but I will otherwise be free to get some recording and get caught back up and get everything back to normal next week. I appreciate y'all hanging in there, and I hope you enjoyed the videos that I gave you last week. HeirofCarthage signing off for now. I will see you soon.